Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Axiom Space's AX1 pre-launch briefing. We're excited about today and the upcoming launch. Moments ago, the leaders at NASA, SpaceX, and Axium Space met for the pre-launch for the Launch Readiness Review, the LRR, and today they'll discuss a little bit about what was talked about at the LRR and what it looks like for tomorrow's launch. Joining us today is Derek Hassmann, Axiom's Operations Director, Dana Weigel, International Space Station Deputy Program Manager from NASA, Angela Hart, the NASA Commercial LEO Program Manager, Benjamin Reed, Senior Director of Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX, and Brian Cizek, Launch Weather Officer of the 45th Weather Squadron. Following remarks, we'll take questions from reporters here who have joined us at the Kennedy Space Center press site and also those on the phone bridge. If you have a question, please remember to state your name, organization, and keep it one question per person to make sure we have space for all the reporters that are joining us today. With that, we'll begin with Derek Hassmann from Axiom.
Thank you, Bettina, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm very excited to be just a day away from what will be the launch of the historic AX1 mission. There's a lot of things about it that are unprecedented and very different than all the previous missions up to this date. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about those. As most of you, I'm sure, know, there have been private citizens that have gone to the International Space Station and into low Earth orbit. But in terms of the International Space Station, it has typically been a single individual as part of a three-person crew. So a single private citizen and then two government astronauts. In the case of the AX1 mission, it's very different in that the entire crew are unaffiliated with any government. Our commander is an Axiom employee, who many of you will be familiar with because of his NASA career, Michael Lopez Alegria. And then the other three are individuals really from across the world. Larry Connor from the United States, Eitan Stibbe from Israel, and Mark Pathy from Canada. So we've got an international crew that has planned a series of experiments and payloads and other activities on orbit that have all been tailored to their relationships and interests. If you look at Larry Connor in particular, he's had previous relationships with both the Mayo and the Cleveland Clinic. So we have facilitated and collaborated with him and those entities in order to design his payload sciences that he's doing during his mission. And that's another unique aspect of this mission, is that the suite of activities are dependent on the individual's interest. So we've worked with them over the past year and a half or so to build a very robust and significant suite of experiments and activities that we're going to do during this 10-day mission. And we are laser focused on that mission. Of course, the priority, as always, is to keep the crew safe, to successfully execute the mission, and to maximize the experience for our crew members. But I'll just take a second to look at the bigger picture from an Axiom perspective. You know, the company was formed in order to build the next commercial space station, and we'll launch that first module of that commercial space station in late 2024. It will be connected to the ISS, and we'll gradually build out that space station between that period from 2024 to 2030, with the goal of eventually separating and providing the commercial LEO destination of choice once ISS has been retired. So this precursor mission is the first of several that will lead up to that 2024 module launch. We're going to build our relationships both with NASA and with SpaceX. We're going to demonstrate the capabilities that Axiom brings to the table so that eventual transition from ISS to the commercial Axiom station is smooth and efficient and very productive for all folks involved. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here today. I appreciate everybody's interest, and especially to be taking part in this press conference with our tremendous partners in this endeavor, both NASA and SpaceX. And it's been a year and a half or so of very hard work since we've been designing the mission essentially from scratch, doing something that's never been done before in exactly this way. But it's very rewarding and thrilling to be a day away. And you'll hear more from Benji about the fact that the rocket and the spacecraft are in great shape and ready to go. I can vouch that the crew is also well prepared, well trained, and great spirits, and they're ready to go as well. And looking forward to launching tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Dana Weigel, International Space Station Deputy Program Manager at NASA.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Great to see so many faces in person after such a long dry spell, so that's great to see. Let's see, the space station team is really excited for this first of its kind mission, and also to be kind of on the leading edge of helping to commercialize low Earth orbit. Very exciting for us to be partnered in that campaign, both with Angela's team and also with the Axiom and SpaceX teams. It's been really, really busy for us on board the vehicle. Over the last few weeks, we've had 2 U.S. spacewalks. We welcomed a new Soyuz crew. As you all know, last week Mark Vande Hei came home on the Soyuz with his cosmonaut crewmates. He did set a new record, which is really exciting for us. He has the longest single spaceflight mission of any American with 355 days on orbit, which is really impressive. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be launching Axiom. After the Axiom mission, actually during the mission, if it launches on time, we will have 1 Russian EVA, and then not long after that, we've got another Russian EVA. As you know, right after the Axiom mission, we'll be launching Crew 4, and then Crew 4 and Crew 3 will do about a 5-day handover on board with each other, and then we'll bring Crew 3 home. In May, mid-May, we've got the Boeing OFT-2 mission that we're looking forward to, and then in early June, we've got the SpaceX 25 mission. So a lot of activity going on, and to echo what Derek says, safety is always our highest priority, and so we're willing and able to stop, take a closer look at whatever we need to. But in terms of space station, we're in great shape and ready for all of these missions. The Axiom mission itself will dock to our Node 2 Zenith port, and their docked portion of the mission will be around 8 days long. Derek mentioned some of the activities they're doing. One of the really neat things for us is the research that he was talking about is sponsored through our Space Station National Lab. And so this is a great opportunity for us to be able to open up the space station's world-class research facilities to a whole new user community. So that's really exciting for us as well. I did talk to the onboard crew last week, and they're getting ready for the mission. They're really excited to welcome the Axiom crew on board, and excited to get to be part of this first-time historic mission. You know, that was a big point that they made, is that, you know, I mean, this is pretty exciting for them too. It's new to them. You know, folks always ask us where people are sleeping on board, so I figured I'd go ahead and just throw that tidbit out there in anticipation of being asked. Similar to what we do when we have direct handovers and extra people on board, we go and kind of look at the real estate and what's going on to figure out where to best put people. So we'll have 1 crew member in Dragon, 1 in our airlock. We'll have 2 people in Columbus. One of them will be we've got a new crew quarters that we flew up, so 1 will be there. The rest will be kind of in a camp-out configuration, just like what we do with our crew during direct handovers. The Axiom, SpaceX, and NASA teams have been working really, really hard to put this mission together. You know, everything from trying to figure out what minimal level of training is required for day in the life on board ISS to what to do to get trained on the payload facilities. All of that's new to us. And then all of the onboard activities are new, including integration with our international partners. So it's really been a really large team effort to get ready for it. I think the teams are ready. They're ready to go launch and go fly this mission. And so I very much appreciate all the hard work they've been doing to get us to this point. And with that, Bettina, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dina. Next, we'll hear from Angela Hart, NASA Commercial LEO Program Manager.
Yes, first I want to thank everyone and reiterate what my colleagues have already said. We're super excited to be here today. Really appreciating you being here at Kennedy Space Center, braving the weather this afternoon, hoping that'll be a good sign and it'll clear up for us tomorrow. So, and glad that there's a lot of interest in this. As everybody has noted, this is a historic event. It is, we are super happy to be here to report our readiness and our readiness to move forward with launch tomorrow. This mission really represents a significant milestone for our plans for the development of a sustainable LEO economy. It is one step forward in the overall strategy that NASA had put forward a few years ago to stimulate demand by utilizing the ISS to conduct commercial activities. This mission, which we call a private astronaut mission, and you may have heard the acronym PAM used sometime when people are talking about it, is one of many that we hope to continue to have. They are going to be conducting additional commercial activities that we've not done before on ISS, so the further use of ISS to strengthen our industry partnerships to continue to do more and more commercial activities on station. It is also, as Derek mentioned, a stepping stone toward their demonstration of activities that they will use as they move forward in the development of commercial LEO destinations, which is a prime goal of my program. And so we're super excited to see this. We know we're going to learn a lot from this first mission, working side by side in a very aggressive schedule on orbit during those 8 days between the NASA astronauts and the private astronauts. We're committed to continue these future private astronaut missions, and we are currently working to finalize our contract with Axiom for the second private astronaut mission that is being worked as we speak. And then we also plan to put out a solicitation, an open solicitation in this year for follow-on private astronaut missions after we go through our lessons learned on this first mission. So very, very excited to see this happen. This started before I took over as a commercial LEO development program manager, and really excited to see this vision that was started on ISS come to pass. Want to thank real quickly all the teams, both NASA, Axiom, and SpaceX. We've had to work through a lot of different new processes, new procedures, new policies, to allow the expansion of items on commercial activities on station, and really proud of the team to make that happen. Still lots of work that needs to be done to continue to formulate our strategy on how we'll move forward in developing the commercial economy. We're already seeing lots and lots of interest. This is a super exciting time. If you haven't had the opportunity to see the pictures, and you'll be able to see it possibly later, seeing both vehicles out there at the pad, is extremely exciting for all of us. Very busy, very exciting time to be partnering with the industry, and I have very, very high hopes for where we're moving forward for commercialization. So with that, I'm appreciative and honored to be here with you today, and really looking forward to the mission tomorrow. Thanks, Bettina.
Thank you, Angela. And I agree. If you have an opportunity to look at the pad and see those rockets up there, it is an amazing moment, and it really emphasizes where we are in the space industry today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Benji Reed, the Senior Director of Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX.
Thank you, Bettina. First of all, good afternoon here in Florida. It's great to be back here and ready to fly humans again to space. Tomorrow, we will be flying Michael, Larry, Eitan, and Mark to the space station. Has been talked about quite a bit already. And then when their mission is over, bring them back home safely to their families. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. This is a sacred honor. We are, truly honored to be part of this transportation service that we can provide to Axiom in their endeavor to build space stations, to continue to expand what we want to do in space. This is all part of making humans a spacefaring civilization, of taking life on this planet across the stars eventually. And it gives me chills just to think about this is another step in that process, and another first, right? We, again, talked about, Derek already mentioned it, but this is a first of sending an all-commercial crew to the International Space Station. And it's not just that they're going to go for a visit, right? It's really important to emphasize, and we've talked about it already, but they've done a ton of training specific to the space station. They've worked hard to understand how they can be contributing members of a national laboratory. And that's pretty darn cool as far as I'm concerned. And and of course they've trained to be in Dragon. They've trained to be, astronauts aboard Dragon, spend the time going up and coming down. But really the meat of this is that they get to be on station doing science, doing research. And that's really great. And I think it bodes very well to see this level of preparation go into this mission as we look towards the future, again, of all of us being able to live and work in space. I just think that's awesome. Tomorrow at 11:17 a.m. here, Florida time, we'll be getting ready to launch them. The good news is that Dragon and Falcon, as Eric mentioned, are in good shape. They're on track right now to be ready for that launch. Kind of looking at the weather for those of us who are maybe trapped in our cars an hour ago, watching these winds come through. But the good news is the weather's starting to look a little bit better. I'll let the actual local weather get talked about here in a second, but I can at least address the ascent and abort track weather. And overall, that's starting to trend a little bit better too, right? We've got a number of points where winds have gone down under the threshold, and which also looks good for lightning and, of course, waves as well as those winds go down. So it's looking really good. You know, again, it's an honor to be part of this, to be here again with a lot of friends and colleagues from many years of work. Ever since my first day at SpaceX, I've been working here with Angela. And I can attest to all of these great folks that we get to be here and be part of this. And finally, of course, a big thank you as part of that length of partnership to NASA. And for helping us all to do this, to continue NASA's ultimate goal, and to the 45th Space Wing for everything that they do. And finally, a shout out to everybody at SpaceX and all of their families and for all the work that they do to help us do this. So thank you, and thank you. Back to you, Bettina.
Thank you, Benji. And next will be Brian Sizek, Launch Weather Officer for the 45th Weather Squadron.
Thanks, Bettina. And I see a lot of umbrellas and rain jackets in the audience right now. And the good news is that the weather tomorrow and through the weekend will be a lot better than the weather that we saw today. Obviously, we had some thunderstorms that reached the severe threshold. We got some wind gusts over 50 knots here at Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. But high pressure will be rolling in tomorrow and through the weekend and looking a lot better weather-wise here at Kennedy Space Center. So why don't we take a live look at the satellite right now, and you can see a lot of activity over Central Florida right now, some thunderstorms moving through the state, and all of those are associated with a cold front that is pushing through the area. And what that is going to allow is for much cooler and drier air to push into the region as we head into tomorrow and through the weekend, as well as high pressure will move over the area. So really no lightning launch commit criteria concerns, really mainly just keeping an eye on some of those winds. So why don't we look at the forecast for the primary launch day tomorrow, just a 10% probability of violation, mainly just tracking some of those northwest winds around 15 to 20 miles per hour. But overall, we are looking good. I do want to emphasize we're primarily focused on the launch conditions here at Kennedy Space Center, but we're also working with the SpaceX team and our partners over the Spaceflight Meteorology Group in Houston to track the conditions along the entire ascent corridor as well. And then why don't we head to the backup day for Saturday. A little bit windier, still just a 20% probability of violation. None of those lightning launch commit criteria concerns, just kind of looking at those liftoff winds. Still a little bit breezy coming from the northwest, around 17 to 22 miles per hour. And then as we head into Sunday, the weather is looking fantastic. High pressure essentially camping directly overhead. It's going to be a bad day to be a cloud here at Kennedy Space Center on Sunday, but overall, weather looking good for Sunday as well. So that's about all I have for weather. Bettina, back to you.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, we'll start taking questions from our reporters. If you are on the phone, please press *1 to indicate you have a question. And we'll start here with Chelsea. We'll wait. Can you wait for the microphone 1 moment so everyone can hear you? Thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea Goad, space.com. So my question is for Derek. Obviously, this is a very different mission from a lot of the other private astronaut missions that we've seen, even just in the last year. I'm curious what you think the precedent that AX-1 will be, and how do you think that will influence the future of these missions? And I feel like this might also go to Dana or perhaps Angela as well, as I'm curious how this will also look in the future on the space station and in low Earth orbit. Will we be seeing this kind of thing routinely, and how will that affect dynamics on the space station and how operations actually continue through the station's tenure?
Okay, great question. And you've probably heard our commander, Mike L.A., talk a little bit about this in terms of the standards that he and his crew want to set. I mean, they want to be the best possible private astronauts that you can imagine, and they've trained in that way. They're very well prepared. They understand where they fit in the big scheme of things. They want to be good house guests, if you will. And really, Mike L.A.'s previous experience, his vast experience, including as a commander of the International Space Station, helped us tremendously in order to determine how to be good house guests and how to minimize disruption to the International Space Station crew on the NASA side, who all have work to do, obviously. So we've talked a lot about that internally. What are the behaviors that we need to model? What are the things that we can do to prepare better in order to be the most self-sufficient we can? Of course, when we arrive, the crew will brief our Axiom 1 crew on first emergency procedures and then kind of an overall, this is station, this is how we do our daily lives, this is where you'll take your hygiene breaks, this is where you'll have meals with the crew and so forth. So there'll be a series of briefings when we first arrive, and after that, the Axiom crew will go off to execute their timelines. Mike L.A. will be a resource, of course, since he's been there before, and he'll help our crew in any way he needs to. And in addition, NASA has made available to us time on the station crew's part as well to help in any way they can. So our goal going into this was really to set the bar very high and to demonstrate to everybody involved this is a realistic thing to go do, that it can be positive, that it can be impactful, and you know, from an Axiom perspective, we want to do this several more times, many more times. So it's on the mind of both the crew and our Axiom ground team to do this the very best way that we can.
Let me just add that from my standpoint, when you talk about previous citizens who've flown to space station, and we usually refer to them as spaceflight participants, you know, historically they've flown up on the Soyuz and they've come over to the U.S. segment, but their interest is usually in two different things. One is using our cupola so they can get great photos out of the window, and the other is using email. So really, our experience to date is really, really limited. And so here we're taking on not just one crew member, we're taking, or two. We've had, you know, two guests before. But they're really there just very temporarily. And so they really don't need to train. They don't need to understand a lot. This is completely different. So here we've got 4 people who will be living and working on board our vehicle. Our crew members go through 2 years of initial training when we first select them. And then they go through off and on training throughout the years, and then finally it culminates in intensive flight-specific training for like a year and a half. And so this is very different, you know, for us. So now the challenge to us is to figure out how we can make this lean, but arm the Axiom crew and the Axiom team with what they need to be successful on board. We're all gonna learn a lot from it. But again, I mean, they are living and working on board, you know, our segment. It's very different from our standpoint compared to what we've seen before.
I would just add that both my colleagues have talked about, you know, how we're ensuring the safety and that the ISS operations aren't really impacted. From our point of view, we're really looking at this in terms of what do commercial missions want to look like? What are the customer needs? What are the markets that are interested? And so we're going to learn a lot from that. We all mentioned a lot of the hard work that got to get us here. A lot of that was to ensure that we did not impact station and that we did all the right things to make sure that that happened in a proper way. But there are a number of pathfinders that are on this mission to see how they operate. Axiom is doing a number of tech demos that lead toward their commercial destinations. And I expect when we have this successful mission, we're going to see an outpouring of other interested parties that are going to be interested in what they can do on the ISS. Our offices works really closely with headquarters to determine, you know, what's that right mix of what you can do on a government institutional facility versus a private facility, which will look much different when we get to commercial destinations. But we do want to be able to support this effort as much as we can so we can continue to build this demand so that when our industry partners are ready to have their free-flying destinations, which is our goal, they will have the customers and markets there to support those so that NASA can be, you know, one of many customers, which is our ultimate goal. So there are a lot of things that we'll be watching and we have been doing in order to make sure those commercial activities can occur and how to do them the right way.
Thank you. Marcia?
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. Probably for Derek or Dana, Are they taking everything they need with them for the 10-day flight with them in this Dragon, or has their food, clothes already been staged up there? I wasn't sure how that's all going, in their science stuff. And what happens after Sunday if you're still on the ground?
Let's see, I'll start, and then I'll see if Derek has anything to add. There's a combination of both. For example, some of the food and there's some common supplies, hygiene supplies, and other just common use items if you want to borrow some wipes or office supplies. Doesn't make sense for Axiom to fly up, small bits and pieces like that. So we kind of have a mix. So we worked together and went through all of the different supplies, and we're very specific about what things we should just use from the onboard inventory versus what items Axiom would bring up with them. And of course, there are also crew preferences, and in those cases, Axiom had all those covered for their crew.
It's been an interesting evolution because when we started a year and a half, 2 years ago, our model was to be completely self-sufficient. We would bring all the clothes, all the food, oxygen, for example, carbon dioxide scrubbing capability. Kind of that was our starting point. And then based on that, we started having these discussions with NASA. What makes sense? Does it make sense for Axiom to fly and certify a dedicated oxygen tank on Dragon? Well, the answer was clearly no. We could depend on the ISS resources for that function and that capability. And then same concept for carbon dioxide scrubbing. So we gradually evolved into, I think, a real sweet spot where we provide the things that Dana mentioned, the clothes and the transit food, for example, and then all the basic necessities that the crew needs for that transit period. But then we depend on the ISS for things like consumables and oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide scrubbing, and so forth. And we're able to establish values for those things and then collaborate on how the exchange looked. So it's certainly something that evolved over time.
What happens after Sunday if you haven't launched?
Oh, you're asking about launching. So right now, I think, as you know, Artemis is working really hard towards a plan to pick back up with wet dress activities on Monday. We are in constant conversation with them. The SpaceX team is working very closely with our range teams and also with the Artemis team. And so we're both going to talk. There are a lot of different conditions we're both looking at overall to figure out how to best meet all the program's needs. And so those are still discussions that are in front of us. So I'm hoping that our weather friend over there comes through and makes it easier for us, but we'll have to have those discussions if for some reason we don't fly by the 10th.
Chris?
Hi, Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight for Benji and Dana. Benji, first time since 1985 two crew flights are flying off the same pad in the same month. What have you put in place to make sure that you can look at everything from Endeavour before Freedom is ready to fly later this month? And for Dana, can you talk a little bit more about that training element for the Axiom 1 crew? Is it more akin to like the sortie flights the shuttle crews used to do, or like they don't need all the training for a long duration mission, but can you sort of quantify what that training difference is for them? Thank you.
Great. I'll talk first about readiness. Excellent question, right? Super important that we are ready to fly, safe to fly. Again, take them there and bring them home safely. That's top priority. To do that, we look at our normal processes, right? How do we get ready for a launch? How do we get the vehicles ready? What does it take to make sure that we are going to fly everybody safely? And you look at that processes, and you look at those timelines and those processes, and you lay them together and make sure that this timing, as you mentioned, within a month, right, is going to work out. And we feel very good about our readiness to do that, and with margin, right? You also don't want to put yourself in a spot where you don't have any margin left over. You lay in things like weather and whatnot, and of course we have to work on that. So we're really bugging you, but
I'll do my best.
it's a bad day to be a cloud and a bad day to be a weatherman. But but no, I think the reality is that you do have to take it seriously and think about that. But on the flip side, if you look at the number of launches we've done this year already, if you look at the number of human spaceflight launches that we've done just in the last couple of years, it's pretty amazing to me to think that we're just under 2 years since we were sitting up here talking about Demo 2 and Flying Bob and Doug. And it really does blow my mind, to use the overused term, that in that short of time we've now flown. This will be our 6th flight of humans, and 5 of those will be the 5th flight to the station. So we're learning, and we're learning how to do it efficiently, but we never take that learning for granted, right? We never just assume that we know how to do this. So I think we're ready to go. We wouldn't be go as of our launch readiness review if we weren't ready to go. We looked closely at that ability. And as we've mentioned on a number of other things, we are in close contact and daily, more than daily, with NASA teams on this interplay between the 2 missions. Because as important as Axiom 1 is, of course, Crew 4 is super important for keeping station crewed and working together. So we're ready, but we're keeping a very close eye on it, of course.
We're going to take a question from.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. For our crew members, they've got to do a really wide range of activities on board. And so we have what we call specialist training flows, which is a pretty intensive degree of training in a certain area. Examples include spacewalks, how to use your spacesuit, how do you do spacewalks, robotics training, and then just maintenance of the vehicle. So if the oxygen system goes down, getting into a rack and replacing components. The toilet going down, for example, which happens a lot. It's a very popular piece of equipment. And so, so there's a really deep level of training required to do that, and it's very different from someone who's a guest. And so what we did early on is we took kind of a concept of operations and we said, what is day in the life for a private astronaut? What might they do? And so they'll be a user of the toilet, but if it breaks, our crew would go and fix it. Photography, video and photography is really important, so their training includes that. And so we kind of went through what are all the different things they need to do. They need to learn how to use our galley so they can prepare food. Hygiene is very unique in a microgravity environment, so they get hygiene training. And so there's a lot of daily living training, just so that they're comfortable and know how to kind of operate independently on board. The piece that's the same as what our crew does is what I'd call kind of the safety-related training, so emergency response and what to do if we have a major contingency on board the space station. And so that level of training and their preparedness is the same as what we would do for NASA crew, just to make sure that everybody knows what to do in the case of an emergency. But a lot of the rest of the training they don't need. And then, of course, as Axiom worked through their research needs, and started looking at different facilities they were interested in using. We worked with them to look at those plans and come up with very customized kind of sets of training specific to their needs. And I think Derek can give you some more specific details for the crew.
Sure. So one of the advantages that Axiom has, and my team in particular, is that having worked for NASA for many years, I was able to recruit a lot of the people that did this training for years and years on the NASA side. So they've trained NASA astronauts for all of the roles and responsibilities that Dana described. So we were able to, again, collaborate with NASA relative to the ISS on what's the minimum requirements first to keep the crew safe. That of course, was the major point of emphasis, so that our crew, led by our commander, knows how to respond in the if those unlikely situations do occur. And then day to day, how do you do hygiene? How do you do your food? How do you do outreach? So one of the big points of emphasis was all the outreach capabilities available on ISS, the cameras and such. How do we schedule public affairs activities on orbit, media outreach, and also just social outreach? How are we going to do Twitter on orbit? So we just focused on the things that our astronauts were going to do and made sure that they understand all the details of those. And as a fallback, again, our ace card is Mike L.A., who's been there and done it. And he's been a tremendous resource in the lead up to the mission, and we expect him to continue in that role on orbit. And on the SpaceX side, our crew, as Benji mentioned, spent a lot of time out at SpaceX headquarters in California, in L.A., and they learned how to work and operate safely inside the Dragon capsule. But L.A. and his pilot, Larry Connor, were given additional training required to actually navigate and operate the spacecraft. So they had additional training that the two mission specialists do not have. So bottom line, it was very specific and very focused on the basic needs of the crew, and then the additional training that they needed to operate specific payloads.
Thank you, Derek. We're going to take now a question from the line. Our first question comes from Jeff Faust. Jeff?
Hi, this is Jeff Faust of Space News. A question for Benji. You mentioned the abort weather was trending better. I wonder if you could quantify that in any way, what you're seeing in terms of conditions and what you're expecting to see on Friday morning. Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, that's a great question, and actually, I don't have all of that detail in front of me. I know that there was a handful of points, maybe half a dozen points along the ascent track. As we know, there's dozens of points along the track that we actually have to monitor, and along those points, we're looking at waves, lightning, winds, all these sorts of important metrics. And a handful of those points that were looking, no-go, have now trending towards go, to coming below that threshold, particularly wind, which is a key factor. But that's the most detail I can give you right now, and I'm sure we'll have more as we move along.
Great. We'll take one more question from the phone bridge, and that is going to be Joey Roulette.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. I'm in a car, so sorry if it's hard to hear. And I'm with Irene Klotz from Aviation Week. First question for anyone who can answer. What's the latest you can launch before you have to stand down for Crew 4? And is shortening the mission an option? And then for Benji or anyone else, for SpaceX, is there anything different about operations for Falcon 9 Crew Dragon missions because of SLS being on the launch pad next door? Thanks.
I'll take the first part of that. So there are a lot of factors and a lot of things that we're still working to assess to really understand what the overall launch campaign looks like. So just to share with you the challenges, if I look out in the May timeframe, third week of May, where we were planning to do the OFT2 mission, the top goal is we want to be done with, we'd like to complete the Axiom mission in that window, the Crew 4 and Crew 3 handover, and then bring Crew 3 home. And so if you kind of back up from that, there is a high beta regime in there. We can't undock in that area. It's a little more challenging for us from a power standpoint, but we have some capability there that we're looking at. But if I work the problem backwards, I've got to have enough attempts to get Crew 3 home. I want to do the Crew 4, Crew 3 handover, and then I want enough runway and window to get Crew 4 up there. That's very high priority for us. So we're still working through that to really understand a handful of those variables, including another Russian EVA that is towards the end of April. We're still refining that date with our Russian colleagues to minimize impacts to our launch opportunities, and we're still looking out at that high beta range to really understand where we could put our undocks there. So still a lot of things that we're working on, but that's kind of the schedule compression that we have over the end of this month and leading into May.
Thank you. We'll go back to the room if any reporter wants to ask a question. Ken?
Thank you. Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Thanks for doing this, and good luck. I think it's real exciting to have a commercial private mission. So Derek, my question is for you. Look to the future with Axiom. You mentioned one module. You're going to do a couple. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the capabilities and the functions and the purposes of your module, especially and any science. I'm a scientist. I really like to hear about the science capabilities on these modules and propulsion. With the Russian situation, we may need a backup propulsion. And will you provide that at all? Thanks.
Sure. So as I mentioned, the first module, which is a habitation module, gets launched in late 2024, and that will support, in terms of ECLS and power and thermal, that will support 4 crew members. And one of the real positives from my perspective about our model, which is to connect to ISS first, is that we have kind of a fallback in terms of tremendous capabilities if we encounter something unexpected. If we have a failure that we don't expect, our ISS friends via power flow through, thermal flow through, can help us kind of weather the storm, if you will, and continue with the program. So one of the things when I was actually considering coming to Axiom, looking at the overall concept, that very much appealed to me. So the capability will grow over time. About 6 months later, we'll launch a second habitation module that will look very much like that, the first module. Alenia Aerospace is building our structures, which you may know built a number of the ISS structures. So there's great experience there, and we have great confidence that they can do that job since they did it for ISS. So 2 habitation modules, and then a more research-focused module will come up. And then ultimately, we have a power and thermal module, which has dedicated heat rejection, heat collection, thermal heat collection, as well as power generation. And the timing of that last module is somewhat dependent on where the ISS is in its lifetime, because when we deploy those arrays on that thermal and power module, they can impact the ISS arrays and their ability to generate power as well. So the timing of that, and we've got time to figure it out, but the timing of that is to be determined. So, and what we're doing now, we're focusing on the core systems, power, thermal, ECLSS, comet tracking, and we're interacting with industry to determine what research, payload, and science capabilities we need. As a basic capability, it's our intent to provide interfaces very similar, if not identical, to the ISS, because down the road we expect to transition a lot of those ISS customers from the ISS to the Axiom station in preparation for the ISS retirement. So we know that's in the baseline, but the rest of it is kind of up to us and industry to determine, and we've just started those discussions.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Don Haladiak for CBC Calgary. My question is, if the launch is delayed a day or two, does it affect the day that they dock with the International Space Station?
Yeah, the phasing is interesting, or the time between the launch and the actual docking, and that varies day by day. So generally, if you delay, well, it really is dependent on the day. It's sometimes with the phasing, you will dock on the same day, and we can get you the details of that. But.
Rachel Crane? Wait for the.
Rachel Crane from CNN. With all the talk of the future space station, I'm curious to know what the transportation arrangements will be. We know right now that Station and NASA, they're supporting 2 private missions per year. What are those? How is that going to change, and how are those conversations going?
So in the short term, we have an agreement in place with SpaceX for the next 4 commercial flights to the International Space Station, for including the X-1 mission. As we go forward, Dana mentioned OFT-2. It's our expectation that Boeing will have a certified capability as well. So, there'll be options in competition. And the other thing that Axiom needs to address going forward is cargo and resupply. And we've had, of course, there's multiple providers of that as well. So Angela talked a little bit about the commercial ecosystem, and the human part of it is just one aspect. The cargo part of it, too, is expanding significantly over time. So we've got the next 4 flights set. We're going to negotiate those flights with NASA, and we hope that they'll continue that partnership with us. But we've got contracts in place with SpaceX that get us the transportation. Going forward, we're going to look at all the options. The Boeing option for crew transportation, and then the various options for cargo as well.
Thank you. We're going to go on the line to a question from Kerry Sanders.
Thank you. This is Kerry Sanders from NBC News. I think you've answered this question, but I'm speaking to a very general audience, and so I asked somebody to address it again. If they're not space tourists, can you explain the difference of what these members of the crew are?
Sure. It's a little bit of a subtle nuance, but when I make the distinction, I think about their mission plan. And for the individuals that we're flying on AX-1, they all have meaningful research that's connected to things that either have been done before on ISS and we're continuing, or areas of interest to them personally. And one thing in particular is aging and how the environment of space can be used to address that. Heart health is another thing that one of our crew members is assisting in the investigation of. Stem cell research as well is in one of the suite of payloads and science that our crew will be doing. So it was important to us that we build a very specific mission timeline that was tailored to their interests on the ground and the relationships that they have with various entities and institutions, and also that kind of open up the capability of the ISS. And Dana mentioned this previously, but you know, there's opportunities out there that don't have a way to get to ISS, and what we're doing with these private astronaut missions kind of opens up those opportunities. So I would say the distinction is that our guys aren't going up there and floating around for 8 days taking pictures and looking out of the cupola. I mean, we have a very intensive and research-oriented timeline planned for them, and it's, I mean, it's significant. It's we think they're going to be very busy, and if there are issues, we've got the right ground team on the ground to help them with that. But it's the word is ambitious, I would say. We've got an ambitious timeline for each of our crew members that involves real research that is going to kind of press understanding as we go forward.
Thank you so much. We're going to take one more question from the phone bridge. Ed Ludlow from Bloomberg.
Hey guys, thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Benji, this one's for you. A similar question to what NASA's been dealing with recently with all the traffic on the range. You know, SpaceX also has a lot going on at one time, including the moving goalposts for Crew 4. Could you just explain a little bit how the preparation for Axiom, you know, the Falcon, the Dragon capsule, how you manage that alongside the roster of other Falcon boosters that you have for other missions? And, you know, is it sort of disruptive to those other projects, or is it complementary into the work that your teams are doing on an ongoing basis?
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. Complementary is a good word, and partnership is another one. We work closely together with NASA. I think Dana may have mentioned it, but our launch chiefs work with, for example, the SLS launch chiefs as they look at the SLS operations. You know, we've talked a little bit about competition, and Derek was talking about cargo and crew providers. We're a big believer in competition. We're a big believer in having an ecosystem and lots of people working together. So in order to do that, you have to plan and have great communication and great partnerships. So as we move ahead, we make sure that we're not stepping on each other, we're not getting in each other's way. It's a competition to have lots of providers, but it's not a competition to get people safely to space or get cargo safely to space. The point is to let's have us all be successful. And so that comes down to communication and trust and partnership and transparency, a big one. We all work very much towards transparency of what are the needs and how do we solve the problems, right? It's a very data-based approach. In terms of our own preparations, you know, SpaceX, on one hand, it always seems like, wow, we've come a long way really fast. But on the other hand, it's been a number of years, right? And we have a lot of folks that work very hard, a lot of very smart people who work hard to have evolved where we are and the number of launches that we do. You know, in the about 11 years that I've been with the company, I've seen that evolution. And we do the same thing, right? The important thing is to do repeatable work in the right way to do it, that the data indicates that you should do it, and constantly learn how to make things more efficient and safer at the same time. So we prepare our rockets in the same way, you know, whether we're launching one this week or two, or one this month or 4 or 5 this month. Same thing with the Dragons, right? And we have multiple facilities where these are being prepped, and then they're brought, you know, to the main hangar at the launch site to be ready to go. So it's not about, oh, we've got to do something very different. It's actually not the goal. The goal is to do what works, do it right, and just have more capability to do that thing that works. And that's what we do.
Thank you. Next question comes from Will from News 13. Camera to the back.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. This one is for Derek Hassmann. Looking forward to once Axiom starts flying its own modules, Will EVAs be a part of that plan? And if so, what might that look like as far as the work that they'd be doing? And I guess follow along for Angela Hart, could that potentially happen on the ISS side as opposed to connected to the Axiom module itself? Thanks.
Okay, so I described our assembly sequence quickly, but it's a HAB1, HAB2 research module, and then what I refer to as the power and thermal module. One other capability in that power thermal module is an airlock capability. That's our current assembly sequence. So at that point, we will have the capability to do spacewalks independently using the Axiom station.
So, I mean, that's a future question. When that capability comes forward, we'll walk through what the partnership and Axiom's needs are. We're currently not planning to do NASA EVAs through the Axiom segment, and I can let Dana add more to that. But there has been a lot of questions leading up to that about EVA capability, and seems to be a lot of interest in the private sector to be able to conduct EVAs, and so we'll continue to watch that. And as the commercial capability related to EVAs expands, evaluate how and what can be done on station, and then how NASA is going to be able to use that capability as well. And so a lot of those are open questions. As I said, we're going to learn a lot as this evolves and figure out what the best way for us to use those capabilities. We're really looking to commercialize LEO. We already, NASA just put out a commercial EVA contract, that leads into that as well. So there's a lot of different pieces to that, and I'll let Dana talk the specifics related to station itself.
Yeah, there are a few other kind of unique considerations when you look at what it takes to do a spacewalk. I mean, one of them is the suit and the vehicle itself, speaking specifically to the airlock. They're really one big integrated system, and so you can't swap and interchange suits into different airlocks, and so part of it depends what suit is NASA using, what suit did our crew train in, what suit is Axiom using at the time, so there's a lot of kind of unique aspects. Spacewalks are dangerous. They will continue to be dangerous. You're more exposed in an environment in general. The level of redundancy you can put into a backpack is less, and so it's really important that the crew train in a specific suit within specific environment. So there's a lot that really goes into looking at how do you safely and smartly do it. The other aspect is the suit and the suit's capabilities are very much tied to the outside of the vehicle and what you need to do the spacewalk. So for example, today we have foot restraints that we can put in different locations to give the crew stability for working. The boot is specifically designed to fit in the foot restraint. And so there are really a lot of interdependencies, so it kind of gets complicated when you look at it. So I'll be happy to have more capability in all those areas and have those discussions, but we just don't know enough at this point.
Thank you. And with that, that was our last question. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward for you to participate and join in the launch. It is scheduled for tomorrow, Friday, April 8th. Launch is at 11:17. Please join us on the webcast. It starts at 7:50 a.m. So tune in to axiomspace.com and go AX1. Thank you.